Hey everyone, this is Jerry, and we've just had quite possibly the most exciting and interesting grand finals in Riftbound so far. For those of you who don't know, we just had RCQ Vancouver, and it was a battle between two already champions of the game. This is Alan ZQ and Sam D. Sherman, who have both already won a Riftbound regional qualifier, making this the first championship where the winner will be a two-time regional champion. There's a lot of stakes here, but you'll notice immediately that we have a bit of a wild card here. So Alan ZQ, since set 3 has come out, has been playing Diana, and Sam D. Sherman has rocked out the Rengar. Now he's made it to grand finals here, which means he has taken a deck that previously people have thought to be not as competitive as, say, Diana, and has managed to carve through the competition and make his way to first. Now, before we dive into the games, and I'll explain kind of what each player's thinking in between turns, I do want to quickly go over the decks and what they really do, just in case you're wondering and want a little bit more insight. If you feel like you know it already, the deck lists are up here right now. Feel free to chuck to the timestamp where the games will start. So to take a look at the decks, let's start with Rengar, who is definitely the outlier here. But when you look at the deck list, you'll see pretty clearly what it's trying to do. For those not in the know, this is a deck list very centered on being aggressive and trying to secure points as fast as possible. You can tell this by the influx of low-cost creatures, particularly ones with ambush. These are often going to be used as combat tricks, generally to turn a fight in the favor. From Sam D. Sherman's point of view, when he's playing against Diana, his goal here is going to want to be to outpace him before Alan can generate the resources and creatures to be able to go over the top of him. Generally, in games of Riftbound, you have a deck that is the beatdown, using some magic terminology, and the deck that is trying to control it. In this case, Rengar is definitely the deck here that wants to go first. And you can tell this because he runs a playset of Determined Sentry. This is a card we've not really seen before in matches, so we're already off to some wild inclusions. Determined Sentry is the only one cost, one power creature in Riftbound right now, and it has the drawback of I can't move to base. This isn't really a drawback for Rengar though, because what he'll often use Determined Sentry for is to move it into a battlefield and then support it with an ambush unit directly from hand. This can often be the chosen champion for the deck, but also Pike, Nidalee, and Grim Apothecary. Grim Apothecary can also return it to his hand so that he can do it again later, getting around the drawback. But he also runs the Emperor's Dais. This is a battlefield you don't really see too often either, that's also capable of returning a unit that's taken the battlefield to your hand. So if he's uncontested, what Sam can often do is move the Sentry in, activate the Emperor's Dais, retreat it, and make a Sand Soldier in place. The Sand Soldier can then be supported with creatures that ambush later on if the opponent decides to take it. Rengar's signature spell, Thrill of the Hunt, is one of the best signature spells ever printed, and unsurprisingly, it features here as a 3-of. This card is very versatile. It can be used to pull a unit out of danger. It can be used to replay a unit to get a powerful trigger, such as Kinku Initiate and Grim Apothecary or Pit Rookie. And it can also be used to reposition a unit from one battlefield to the other. So if Rengar Trophy Hunter is on one battlefield, he can actually cast Thrill of the Hunt to reposition him to the other battlefield if the opponent chooses to go there instead. So there's a lot of interesting tricks for this deck. His opponent, Alan, let's take a look at his deck. Alan ZQ is sporting his iconic Diana at this point. He has brought Diana to every regional so far, moving on from Ezreal, who was also blue and purple previously. So it's fair to say Alan ZQ here is one of the best pilots of blue-purple decks as it stands at the moment. And his list is fairly similar to ones we've seen in previous regionals. For context here, Alan generally tends to run a more slow controlling game plan with his playstyle. However, he does sport quite a few cheap creatures and ways to fight for the board early, so he's not just letting you take over the game. If anything, he's playing cheap creatures and then controlling the board with cheap spells and interaction to go with it. You notice here he has Smokescreen in the main. This is a pretty unorthodox card you don't see too much anymore, now, especially now that a 3-mana version with no recycle has been printed. However, Alan instead opts here to go for the 2-mana variant. He doesn't mind recycling the rune to get the cheaper effect. He also runs Turn to Dust and 2 copies on Unacceptable Losses. Now, interestingly, this gives Sam D. Sherman a bit of an advantage going into the game, because Sam, if you didn't notice from his deck list, doesn't actually run any gear, which means from game 1, 3 cards in Alan's deck are not going to be very useful. He'll almost certainly sideboard these out going into game 2 and 3, which might give Sam a little bit of a lead in the first game. Some other things to note with Diana is that this Diana list is sporting Fizz plus Starcrossed. This is a very, very powerful combo that you can run in purple. Fizz being this really powerful card from Spirit Forge that lets you replay a card from your graveyard. Starcrossed being a card that returns a creature to your hand, meaning if Fizz retrieves Starcrossed from the grave, he can bounce himself back with Starcross and return a unit back. This is a very powerful loop. Fizz does recycle Starcross, however, he often then finds value being played to go retrieve another spell. Alan ZQ is a massive fan of Vex, not just the Vex Apathetic 4-cost, but he also plays the Vex from Spirit Forge. This card is very powerful, very difficult to contest. However, he does reduce it down to 1 in this list in favor of Hui. This is another new card that is very popular in Diana, very powerful, particularly with movement effects such as Ride the Wind, which he also has as a playset in this deck. Alan's battlefields, you can see they're very tilted towards spells and being able to hold reactions up on your opponent's turn. Targon's Peak allows him to untap, Abandon Hall allows him to pump his creatures, and Ravenbloom Conservatory will allow him to find more spells should he be defending it. Diana herself is a very powerful unit for finding spells, so you can see here Alan has tilted his deck towards a deck that plays cheap and efficient creatures and backs it up with interaction. So diving into game 1. Alan opts to go first as the player who is higher seed. He finished 3rd and Sam finished 5th. So Alan has chosen to go first and he's going to be playing Ravenbloom Conservatory, meaning his intention is probably going to be to move into that battlefield first as he is the player going first, so he can control it and get its trigger. Sam has opted for Emperor's Dais, so he might want to look for that 1-drop creature to be able to move in and bounce it. However, we will see what he opens with here. In the first couple turns, both players generally will want to develop the board. There's no real point holding interaction if you have nothing to interact with, particularly if you're Alan, who is going first here. Ideally, he opens with a Ravenbloom Student here, and he does. That is an excellent card for him to find. Ravenbloom Student is quite like Prowess from Magic the Gathering, where when you cast a spell, it gets bigger. Perfect for a deck like this that wants to sling spells and defend. Sam opens Inferna. I don't think this would be his ideal opening. However, Inferna is great at taking back a point as she goes up to 3 when she attacks. Alan's thinking about his turn. Now, we do see he has a purple Vex in his hand. This is one of the key cards that Diana can use to beat Rengar. Rengar has very little in ways to beat purple Vex, and he actually does go for the hold here. So by using purple Vex here, Alan is setting up a situation where he is calling Sam to find an answer for this immediately. Now keep in mind, Alan is actually not fully tapped out here either. Diana lets him tap for 1 mana here. And to go back to what I was talking about with Vex, because Rengar relies on ambushing units to be able to tip the odds in his favor, there are very little answers Rengar can manifest against Vex without using a buff spell. The only out that Sam really has here is Punch First. So Alan here is doing a bit of a test here to see if his opponent has Punch First. He may have a combat trick here to be able to beat Inferno, such as Gust. However, Sam can actually beat this if he buffs the unit in base, as Gust can only target units at a battlefield. And if you look here, we actually do see Sam is on Punch First. So Sam here has the potential to be able to absolutely blow Alan out here. I don't know if Alan is actually expecting this. This is an open deck list match, so both players are aware what the other is on. And he goes for the Punch First from base. So there's actually nothing here Alan can have that will be able to beat this trade here. This is amazing value for Sam here. And you actually see Alan did have a Gust in his hand. So if he didn't buff his unit before moving in, Alan would have been able to Gust and hold there, and it would have been a completely different outcome. So really good instincts from Sam there to buff in base. And he's going to leave 2 mana open now. That could be potentially Thrill of the Hunt. However, there's probably not many ways here Alan can immediately take the board back off him. Alan instead opting to build up the board with a Merchant and Diana. So this is a turn where he is effectively saying to Sam here, you can have the next couple points. I need to rebuild the base. So this is already a really good start for Sam. Alan doesn't want to fall behind in tempos. He needs to develop creatures before his interaction can be used to get the points. Sam, however, is in the driver's seat here. He's very happy to keep taking points and try and close out the game as quickly as possible. Alan lets Sam take with Pit Rookie, and then Sam opts to use the Emperor's Dice to return that Pit Rookie, so he can give that buff to something else if he wishes as well later on. Inferno's probably not going to be able to hold the point, so he does retreat. He's worried about that Inferno dying, and he wants to use it to attack. And then he replays Pit Rookie, putting a buff on... He's putting a buff on the Sand Soldiers. So we do know Alan here has Gust, meaning he can use that Gust on that Sand Soldier. He's going to opt to move in Diana and activate her ability. He finds a stack deck, which is a great card out for Alan to get. That will help him stage a comeback here because he can use stack deck to go digging for the answer he needs here. Now, there's a lot of units on the board, meaning Alan's single target removal will be a fair bit weaker here. He does go for the Gust now, but Alan now has 3 points. So he's on odds, and he is going to retreat that Traveling Merchant. He doesn't want to lose that unit. He's probably going to play it in base to redevelop it, I imagine. And then he's going to keep the rest of his mana up to protect Diana, which he will. There we go. So ideally here for Sam, being on odds, he really only wants to take 1 point. So he goes for a Sabotage here, which is great timing. Sabotage is so good here because it gives Sam great knowledge on what he can expect Alan to be holding up, and more importantly, what he isn't. He sees those 2 stacked decks, so he knows they could get a card that isn't in his hand. However, he does see Gust, Ride the Wind, and Smokescreen. So these are all great cards for Alan at this point. It's not ideal for him, since Gust will be used to remove a little creature, Smokescreen can be used to debuff a threatening creature, and Ride the Wind can also be used to get Diana out of danger if things get too hairy. So unfortunately for Sam, he doesn't have many great targets here. Maybe he takes Gust, just because he seems to be using a very small board here. And Gust can potentially be beaten by him playing some ambush creatures, to be able to buff up the unit that is being gusted. Since Rengar Pridestalker does give creatures power when when Sam plays cards, so it may be good for him to take that here. So after quite a bit of deliberating, he does end up going for Ride the Wind, which means Diana will not be able to escape from this combat. So his intent here is probably to kill Diana, or at least try and kill it. The unfortunate thing is he's got a lot of tricks. Nope, never mind. Oh, and he's moving Diana in. Okay, so he wants to try and take both of these units out at once if he can. If he moves Diana in as well, he doesn't trigger Ravenbloom Conservatory, which maybe is what Alan wanted there, and he is passing focus. So he does just kill both. So Pit Rookie comes in, Alan's going to cast Stack Deck now to try and find some cards. Now he's probably not going to, he's got a Gust in his hand, so he may use it here to stop the point. This would leave Sam on odds. Sam ideally wants to get to evens this turn so that he can try and win in 2 more turns. So Alan, recognizing that, will go for Gust. He wants to try and keep him off even numbers so that Sam can't easily score. Now, Sam could ambush a creature here. Yep. So he ambushes a creature, and Pit Rookie goes back to his hand. But the important thing here is this will secure his point. It's important that Sam goes to evens this turn because he needs to try and close the game out as quickly as possible. And since it's 8 points to win, and then Sam opting to use the Emperor's Dies to make another Sand Soldier. So he's playing this super well. Not really giving Alan great targets for his spells and constantly threatening points. The Sand Soldier being at 3 as well means that Traveling Merchant on the battlefield won't actually be able to kill it without some tricks here. So he may just have to move into Ravenbloom Conservatory and look for a card. Nope, he might have a Stupefy or a trick here. We know he does have a Smokescreen, but I don't think he wants to use it here since it's quite expensive and he probably wants to save it for Rengar. He is going for the Smokescreen. Okay. That's a bit of a desperation play in my opinion. That is definitely Alan recognizing that he's behind and needs to stop his opponent. Having to use Smokescreen there on a Sand Soldier probably doesn't feel great. But Alan really is looking to try and take control of the game again. We know that Sam has a Grim Apothecary in his hand, so he will be able to fight for the board as well here. That Pit Rookie can move in, and with the Grim Apothecary potentially take it out as well. So Sam opts to move in for the Conservatory. If there's no reaction from Alan, this will be his 5th point, but I suspect he's going to try and fight for that 6th point this turn because he's going to want to try and take it. He goes for Ride the Wind here. So Alan does find the second Ride the Wind, probably from one of his stack decks he was casting earlier. Is he going to move the Sand Soldier or the Merchant here? If he moves the Merchant, he gets a trigger here, but he might not want to risk losing it, so he may move the Sand Soldier. It's the Merchant. So the Merchant's going to do a discard draw trigger here. So interestingly enough, does it trigger Ravenbloom? Yeah, so since Merchant is a surprise defender here, it actually triggers Ravenbloom Conservatory. Oh, Sam, seeing the moment, immediately goes for Rengar on other battlefield to put an ambush down on Pit Rookie. Excellent play. However, Alan has the Stupefy in response, it seems. So at this rate, they're going to trade. However, if he has the Grim Apothecary, so he can actually come down, put a buff on Pit Rookie again and not return it, and he would get both points here and kill all of Alan's creatures. He's now thinking if he wants to play another creature to be able to put a buff on Pit Rookie. He does have that Grim Apothecary from earlier, so Sam here potentially could put a buff on Pit Rookie or probably to play around Gust, potentially buff the Grim Apothecary itself. However, he does lose here to Moonfall, Diana's signature spell, which will debuff the board. So he's probably wondering if his opponent has it in their hand. He does have 3 mana up, so it's a bit of a risk. He passes focus back to Alan. Does he have the Moonfall? If he has Moonfall, he hasn't lost the game yet. If he doesn't have Moonfall, it may be hard for him to come back here. And he takes the trade. This puts Alan in a very difficult position where he needs to take both battlefield up, and he scoops it up, meaning Sam has taken game 1. Sam, not only has he taken game 1, he has actually won going second as the aggressive deck, which is a fantastic start for Sam. This is exactly where he wants to be. Since game 3, he can run Arena's Greatest now, which will really set the pace for the game for him. Going into game 2 now, as we expected, Sam here is moving to Starspring as his second battlefield. The reason he chooses this one is he wants Arena's Greatest for game 3, since he is going to be going first, which will give him a big advantage here. Alan has gone for Targon's Peak, as he can move in to take it first and hold up Interaction and untap 2 runes. Looks like Sam has some 2-drops in his hand, 2 Fey Folks, so he will have something to do immediately, particularly with Starspring. This is a really strong opener for him, so it's looking pretty good for him here. I'll explain the Fey Folk Starspring interaction if we get to it. In terms of sideboard, I would 100% expect Alan to have sideboarded out the Gear Hate he had in his deck, which I do think hurt him quite a bit in game 1. So he moves in for Targon's Peak. Now he probably plays Diana here or a creature, and then untaps runes so he can defend himself. Oh, he plays the Vex. Alright, so he's not making the same decision he did last time where he leaves the Vex in a battlefield. He's instead opting to move the Vex into base. Now, if Feyfolk wants to pull in Vex, he'll have to play the defect cost. However, he likely won't do this, as any creature he brings in will be stunned and won't be able to kill Vex. The normal combo here is to bring Feyfolk into Starspring, ambush a unit in, and then use the Starspring trigger to retreat the Feyfolk, effectively killing your opponent's unit for free and developing your unit at the same time. It's a really powerful combo, very popular in Rengar. He goes for Sabotage. He wants to see what his opponent is on here. So he spots Singularity. This was a card not in Alan's main deck, so this card will be particularly problematic if he leaves Rengar on the battlefield with no mana left. Singularity is just enough damage to kill Rengar and one other creature, so he needs to be mindful of that. Knowing Singularity is there, though, gives him a big knowledge advantage, because he knows he can play around it now, and he knows he needs to. Gust and Stupefy are probably more immediately useful for Alan here. Personally, seeing Stupefy go would potentially be good for him, since it takes away 1 card draw from Alan, particularly since he has Ravenbloom Student too. This is a card he could use with Ravenbloom Student to get extra value in a future turn. However, he may opt to go for Singularity if his hand has a lot of creatures that might get absolutely nuked by it, considering that Vex is on the battlefield too, meaning he won't be able to play creatures and utilize them immediately. He'll have to wait a turn, making them vulnerable to Singularity. So he opts to take Stupefy here, so he wants Alan to not have the card draw. Goes for Pike here, and immediately activates him, so he pays the extra red. And so Pike comes in as 5 damage here. So what he might do here is he might use Feyfolk retroactively here to card in Vex, and now that Pike has come in and killed the unit. That is a fantastic read there. Vex is hands down the biggest threat to Sam here, so he's immediately cleared that from the board. Now he is a little bit fragile, having only 2 runes and 1 quite frail unit now in the battlefield. Alan will need to spend a turn here to redevelop. So he does. He goes for Diana and then goes for Ravenbloom and passes. He says, right, okay, you win this round. However, I'm going to rebuild my board and I'm going to threaten to take it off you again. Now, what will Sam do from here? Pike does have ganking, so he can score the 3rd point here if he wants. However, Pike is almost certainly going to be in harm's way if he chooses to do that. It'll be pretty free for Alan to move a unit up and kill Pike if he does it. Sam is on evens here, meaning he doesn't need to score this turn if he can score twice every other turn. So he does retreat Pike and opts to go for a little bit of a safer play here by passing. Alan is at Singularity mana and does have 2 targets here. However, they aren't particularly juicy targets, so Alan may opt to not go for that. Draws a Star-Crossed off of Diana's effect. So that's another card we know now he has. Not as effective against his ambushed units, however. And Alan does instead opt to develop Hui. This is one of the biggest threats in the deck. And usually, if unanswered, Hui will probably take over the game himself. He is very strong, draws a lot of cards in a deck like this, and can also go up to 8 power very easily by discarding a unit. So Alan opts to only take 1 of the points, and instead choosing to use his mana here to defend. So we'll see what Sam does here to retaliate. He plays a Kai'Sa, non-accelerated, and then moves in Inferno, who with the Rengar buff is +4 here. Alan finds a Vex, leaves it on top of his deck here, so that's a potential future threat here he can set up. So if Alan on his next turn moves into a battlefield, he can draw that Vex and play it onto said battlefield to immediately set up her powerful ability. And unfortunately for Sam, his deck isn't really good at avoiding combat, which means that Vex will probably find value. While it might not increase the mana cost of Sam's spells so much, that Vex will definitely be utilized by Alan to reduce the cost of his spells, which is probably not good here for Sam. Alan manages to untap with Hui, triggering Hui, and immediately discards that Vex, so he wants to put it to 8, which may mean he makes a play here to move that Hui to the other battlefield. Possibly not. It feels like Alan here is trying to bait out interaction here by Sam. While discarding and drawing a card may seem quite trivial since you don't actually go up a card, what it does do is it allows Alan to actually sculpt his hand and find the exact cards he needs for this matchup. Alan is probably just going to look for tricks that he can use to debuff Sam's units and force him to have to overcommit in order to take a battlefield. Rengar is not as good at drawing cards as Diana, so every card Sam has to spend here is advantage for Alan. It's a finite resource for him. Sam is going to need to find a way to take out both of these Huis. Alan triggers Star Spring as well, so that he gets another Hui trigger. This is very much looking in Alan's favor here. And Alan here is going to go for Starcrossed here. Oh, and Sam has the response with Thrill of the Hunt. So this means that Fizz will be bounced, presumably, or maybe Ravenbloom Student, depending on what Alan has chosen to bounce here, and Kai'Sa will be spared here. Presumably Alan chose to bounce Fizz, since it means he can replay him. And with only one rune left, it looks like Alan's probably not going to be able to get out of this one. And he opts to use Diana's mana to be able to cast Flash to retreat his units. Now that'll be another move trigger for Hui as well. So Alan, once again, chilling on 4 points, will be in a decent position. However, Sam will get a hold point here, meaning he goes to 5 and potentially 6 on his next turn. So Sam is definitely in a position where he is looking to close the game out in the next 2 turns, as Alan really appears to be amassing resources. Sam is probably going to do an all-in soon. So with that little maneuver on his turn, Sam goes up to his 6th point, meaning this turn, his goal will probably be to try and set up for a double conquer in the following turn. He does have to go through 2 Huis to do this, and a Ravenbloom Student, so it's not going to be easy, but what I suspect he'll do is he's going to retreat Kai'Sa and try and build up a board to push in next turn. If Alan did not already have creatures in his base, this would be a really strong play, but unfortunately Alan has got some quite tall creatures with Hui. He could absolutely stack a battlefield and make life very difficult for Sam. So Sam does retreat Kai'Sa, plays Pit Rookie to develop Kai'Sa. I saw he has a Kinku Initiate in his hand, so he might play that just to draw more cards. He will. So he draws a card here. The problem he has is he knows that Alan has Singularity in his hand. He saw that with Sabotage, meaning Alan might just fire off the Singularity here and shut down his opponent from being able to play the board. I suspect this will be the Singularity turn. If Alan goes for Singularity here, Thrill of the Hunt allows Kai'Sa to survive, if he's got it. However, beyond that, Alan might just take this game if Singularity is allowed to be resolved unanswered. He's setting aside the 6 runes. He's going to do it, I suspect. This is probably as good as it gets for Singularity. If he stacks the board with 2 Huis, Rengar is going to have a very difficult time. Yep, so he goes for the Singularity here. Alan, recognizing the vulnerability here, uses the Singularity to remove the 2 creatures. And now Alan probably goes to 6 here and tries to double hold here, I suspect. As if he doesn't, he potentially sets up a situation where Rengar can win here, as the Rengar player is on 6. One of the really powerful parts about Hui's ability as well is, unlike Traveling Merchant, Alan actually gets to draw first instead of discard. This does mean that you don't get to draw a free card if you have no cards in hand. However, it does get a little bit more selection usually with what you actually want to discard. So he moves into Capture Targon's Peak. This will mean he gets 2 mana back at the end of his turn, and then he is going for the double capture. This is a crucial step here. So Alan going for the double capture is signifying that he is going to try and make sure Sam does not win next turn. If Sam cannot win next turn, Alan will be in a situation where he likely wins. He's got lots of tricks to move units back and across battlefields. He stacks the double Hui, making it very difficult for his opponent to be able to do it. Now, however, we did see Sam has his Rengar still, and he might have Punch first. That would be 11, allowing him to go over the 2 Huis. However, with 5 mana, I suspect Alan probably has a few tricks to be able to deal with this. We haven't seen Smokescreen this game, or the Signature Spell, so there are ways for Alan to be able to debuff the units that are attacking him. But Sam has the Sabotage, so he's going to get a full view here of what he is up against. And unfortunately for Sam, there is Moonfall and there is Star-Crossed, which means that if Rengar gets bounced with 9 mana up, he will not be able to replay Rengar, which is a huge deal to him. Star-Crossed is going to absolutely come down and stop whichever creature gets hit with Punch first, if Sam has it, and he's got an influx of units to be able to bounce, unfortunately. So I'm not really liking Sam's odds here. Stupefy and Stack Deck as well will allow Alan to go digging for another answer. I think Alan here might have him beat. Sam definitely thinking hard about this one. So Sam picks Starcross and Alan says, well, you know what? You can see my hand because I don't think the game will go longer than this turn. Alan knows it's the definitive turn, and I think Sam does too here, but Sam is kind of forced to do something. Otherwise, Alan will win the game. So he goes for Rengar here. Interesting play. And Alan is immediately going to fire off the stack deck to see what he can find here. Alright, he picks the card and he doesn't show it to his opponent since it's not open knowledge. However, will it be a card that helps him here? We're going to find out. Sam has 3 mana left, so he likely will take this battlefield. I think Alan is happy to let him have this, as since Rengar is probably the only way he gets through the double Hui wall. He does have Fizz, which means he can use Ride the Wind with Fizz, as he casted Ride the Wind earlier and it's in his grave. So Alan is probably thinking about retaking that point on his following turn, meaning all he needs to focus on is not losing his Huis. Moonfall is particularly strong too. He can use Moonfall to move Rengar off that point if he really needs to. Alan definitely is in the driver's seat here. So one way Alan can win next turn, if Sam does go for a hold here, is he uses Fizz Ride the Wind to retreat one of the Huis, then casts Moonfall to pull that Rengar across. Now if he has Thrill of the Hunt, Rengar can definitely move back. However, all he needs is a unit for Hui to be 8 power, and it will not matter. I think there's quite a few lines here. In Sam's position, he may be thinking about trying to hold Starspring here and say to Alan, look, you can't get those units across. I'm going to hold to 8 points before you. Good luck. Which might be the play. We see Sam actually has Punch First in his hand, so he may try and go for this. Now that Starcrossed is out of the equation too, Punch First with a hold sounds a lot more enticing. I also think that's a Nidalee he has. So taps 2, recycles 1, moves in, and casts Thrill of the Hunt. So he has the second Thrill of the Hunt, rolls it back to show something. So he's rolling back to show he has 3 mana. He taps 2, shows Thrill of the Hunt to move Rengar across, and Alan has the counterspell. That will be game. Yep, with 1 mana open, Alan can absolutely retreat a Hui, Moonfall Rengar across. Even if he draws a card with the point, it doesn't matter, because at that point, Hui will move in and get the 8th point, because Alan will have taken both battlefields. He uses Fizz to get Flash, makes a lot more sense, because he can move both of them back. Sam, recognizing it, packs it up. And that is game 2. We are down to the final game here. But if we recall, Sam is in the driver's seat here, since he gets to run Arena's Greatest going first. This is the ideal position he wants to be in. So it's not too bad. It's not the end of the world they lost game 2. If anything, Alan is probably more favored to win that game 2. However, that Singularity from the sideboard is definitely a threat. So starting off on game 3, unsurprisingly, Sam has chosen to go first, and Alan has Abandoned Hall. Now, Rengar can't make great use of this battlefield, as he is quite creature-light, and Sam opens the Fey Folk. This is a great card. This will allow him to be able to trade out whatever creature he moves in. And with the buff and the +2 from Rengar Pridestalker, he will be able to trade here. Alan does have the Stupefy, so it's 3 into 3. But killing that Diana is not bad for him, particularly since he developed 2 creatures still. Alan with 5 mana may opt to develop the board. He does. He plays a purple Vex. So if I'm Sam here, I may just look to try and score 1 or 2 points. Depends on what's in my hand here. He may want to just try and score 2 points and go for broke here to try and get a head start on Alan while he's building the board. He needs to make somewhat bold plays here to get ahead of Alan. So moves in, takes both battlefields and passes. So Alan here is put in a position where he wants to ideally try and take both these battlefields. He only has 1 unit in play here, so he has to choose 1 battlefield here. And he grabs Moonfall. So with Diana's ability in Vex, that Moonfall cost him 1 rune. Holy moly. That is value. It is a massive tempo loss for Sam, since he completely removes his board that he was trying to set up here. This is not where Sam wants to be. He needed those units to be able to keep contesting boards, and Alan recognizes that, immediately fires off the Moonfall and gets rid of them. With those units cleared as well, Alan can actually opt to develop the board a bit too, so he plays the Ravenbloom Student. He says to Sam, right, you can hold to 4, But you're not really in a position to take both battlefields anymore. I have this Vex in play. On top of that, he can't really use Rengar to safely remove Vex either, since he is almost certainly holding some combat tricks. I mean, if he drops that Rengar on Vex, Rengar might not even win that fight. Sam may just need to retreat and try and develop the board here as he looks to try and get back in the game, because he's run out of units to score points after that devastating Moonfall. Unfortunately, Sam's deck list is really not good at playing from behind, particularly into a deck like Alan's that holds all this interaction for his creature-based tricks. Rengar is so much less scary when you can smokescreen him or stupefy him. Alan, those spells that Alan will cast will be so much cheaper and make Vex so much taller. So if I was in Sam's position here, I would probably be thinking about retreating and trying to build a board and then hoping my opponent doesn't have Singularity. It's not a great position to be in, but in Sam's case, as the aggro deck, he needs to start taking the risk. And he goes for the Rengar on Vex. This is a very bold play. You don't make this play unless you have Punch First to buff the Rengar after being debuffed. And he has Smokescreen. Oh no! This is really bad. So Vex goes up to 6. Rengar goes down to 3. This is absolutely devastating if he loses Rengar here. This could be the end of the game for poor Sam here. He may have Thrill of the Hunt. He does have Thrill of the Hunt, but we also know, yep, there's the counterspell, and that is going to be a devastating blow to Sam here. That is absolutely not what you want to see there. And Alan, having absolutely drained Sam of his resources, can absolutely go to town and build a board now. He knows that Thrill of the Hunt is down, he knows that Orange Rengar is down, he retreats Vex, plays another unit, and then passes with all this interaction, making it so hard for Sam here to take points and get in the game. So Sam opts to build up the board now. Will he move the Pit Rookie in to fight the Ravenbloom Student? It's a little risky, since Ravenbloom Student can be buffed with spells. He goes for stacked deck, meaning Ravenbloom Student is at 3. All he needs is a Stupefy here, and the Ravenbloom Student will be way bigger. Goes for another stacked deck, so this is 4 now, meaning they will at minimum trade. Alan may just opt to pass focus here and make him have to play another card. Preferably an ambush creature here, just so that he can win and take this battlefield. And he goes for the trade. This is massive. So Sam either doesn't have an ambush creature or opted to not play one. However, I think in Sam's position, he definitely would have played an ambush creature here. And he's just given Alan information that Sam does not have any more instant speed creatures. So Alan may just go for both battlefields here. Moves Vex in, goes up to 6 points, meaning Alan absolutely is going to look for the hold here now if he can get it. He plays the purple Vex, which will turn off all ambush cards, and says go. This is an absolutely dire position for Sam to be in, unfortunately. Rengar really struggles when Vex Apathetic is in play, as all their creatures have ambush and get stunned when they would come into attack normally. This is a very bad position for Sam. And unfortunately for him, he needs to make a move this turn, as he needs to remove at least one of these battlefields to stop Alan from winning. Alan is absolutely cooking here in his position. We haven't seen Punch First yet from Sam, so he may have a get out of jail free card. He is probably going, it looks like he's going to play creatures to try and buff up a unit. He moves in the Sentry, who's up to 3 now. Bigger than the Merchant, which will kill it, so Alan might have to play a trick. He plays the Gust. And with 1 card in hand here, Sam may not be able to win here. He will need to replay the Sentry, buff the Feyfolk, and trade into the Merchant. But if Alan has another answer, I think that's the end of the game. And unfortunately, it looks like Rengar, after having come so close, will fall just short here. Alan going for the Gust here because he does know that if the Sentry is removed from play here, that Feyfolk will not likely be able to go over the top of the Merchant. Not to mention, Alan could have plenty of other answers in his hand at this point. And the last card in Alan's hand was Star-Crossed, meaning all those buffs were for nothing. Thrill of the Hunting Pike, he's still stunned, so he'll have to retreat from Vex. And with only 2 mana left, all he can do now is play the Sentry, buff the Feyfolk, and try and move it in. We know the last card in his hand is the Vex. Oh, he's opting to move the Merchant, but this will mean the Merchant will trigger as it's being moved across. He discards the Vex and draws another card, and they trade. Alright, so Alan has the capacity to win the game this turn, depending on what he draws. Finds the Tide Turner, and that will be the game. After coming so close, unfortunately, Rengar falls just short, and Alan is officially the first ever 2-time Riftbound Regional Qualifier Champion. This was the first of a series of videos I'm looking to get out where I dissect and go into proper pro matches and just online games in general. There's not really many ways to watch high-level Riftbound events, and I'm thinking I might be a good provider of that. So if you enjoy these, feel free to subscribe. I'm Jerry, and I will see you with another high-level replay soon. All the best.